Our 3-day trip to Michigan. Mom and Linda, November 1 through 3, 2022. For this wonderful trip, we had 3 main goals. 1, to visit the gravesite where Mom's dad is buried. 2, visit the church where Mom and Dad got married and also see where they met at the University of Michigan. And 3, find the hardware store and the home in the town of Commerce where Mom and her parents, Raymond and Genevieve, lived and worked. With these 3 main goals, what would we come to find out? What mysteries would be solved? And what adventures would we have? Here are our highlights. This is Raymond Melvin Erickson, born in 1905 and passed on in 1954 at 49 years. And here's the notice of his passing and the funeral arrangements. So our first stop on our first day in Commerce was to visit the funeral home. The name had changed, but the building was intact and fully in use. We spoke with the woman in charge that day, and she greeted us with interest, and she shared details about the facility today. Soon, we were on to the cemetery where Raymond is buried, the oldest cemetery in Commerce, dating back to 1834. We knew his gravesite was Lot 100, according to this old and worn map, which we obtained from the Charter Township of Commerce, Michigan. Google Maps pointed us in the right direction too, relative to current surroundings, so all we needed was just go to the cemetery and walk to Lot 100, or so we thought. But once there, we looked and looked, but couldn't find the grave. It just wasn't there. Maybe the headstone got knocked over, maybe a lawnmower hit it. Just in time, though, a man walked into the cemetery right ahead of our car. So I asked him if he was familiar with the grounds, and he said, "Yes, I am familiar. I come here every Sunday to take a walk. It's such a peaceful place." So I explained our predicament, and he said he'd be happy to help. He also said Raymond Erickson's name sounded very familiar. So together, Steve and I walked through the entire cemetery, but still no luck finding the site. So we exchanged phone numbers just in case, and Mom and I prepared to leave. But just as we were backing out of the lot, I got a text message from him, and this is what he said. "Found it. Come straight to the back." Mom and I were stunned to get the message and to see the photo. "It's here," we said out loud. We drove forward to the farthest edge of the cemetery, and there it was. How amazing. Steve said the reason why Raymond's name sounded so familiar to him is that the headstone is the first one he sees when he comes back into the cemetery from the nature path he often walks on at the very edge of the grounds. Strangely, though, the lot isn't marked at all on the old map. But the cemetery manager filled us in the next day with a few details, like the fact that the gravesite is truly not on any map he has. Also, he said Mr. Erickson's the only person buried in that lot. All good to know, I suppose. Maybe the map will be updated, although it does have a certain mystique, as it is. Steve and Mom and I texted a bit more before we left the cemetery. We were all amazed and delighted at how things turned out. Steve said he'd keep the stone well taken care of for us and our family. And indeed he did. Shortly before Christmas, he sent this photo of the gravesite. It's beautiful to see that it's no longer lost, forlorn, or forgotten. He gave it new beauty and tender care. Thank you, Steve. It was so good to meet you on November 1, Dia de los Muertos, the eve of All Souls' Day. Ann Arbor. It was a bit surreal to be there. And here's where Mom and Dad and Lori and I lived from 55 to 58. It was my first house ever. That's, of course, the 4 of us on the right, plus Sandy, out on the sidewalk on an icy winter day. Lori and I are suitably bundled up, but likely quite eager to get the wagon moving. Finding the house in 2022, though, would not be a problem. Well, let's not be too sure. But Google Maps was pretty clear. The house still stands on Pontiac Trail. It's no longer red, though, and a little entryway was added at some point over the years. But wow, it looks the same. Unfortunately, no one was home, so we didn't stay long. I looked it up on Redfin, though. Nice inside, very appealing. Next stop, the church where Mom and Dad were married. Here's the street view on their wedding day on the sprawling University of Michigan campus. And we had no trouble finding it. Here's the current walkway view on the day of our visit. Just like our old home on Pontiac Trail, very little has changed here from 70 years ago. Pastors Bailey and Matt happened to be there too, so they gave us a tour of the interior, shared some church history, and described their work, which is primarily with UM students. But onward to more of the campus. We wanted to see Stockwell Hall, Mom's freshman dorm in 1950. It's amazing that she saved her college ID. It's still in great shape. Not much to report, though, about the stately building. We pleaded our entry by knocking on the door a few times, and we were able to get in to see a bit of the main floor. We were told that much has changed over the years, many redesigns. It would have been interesting to see Mom's dorm room, though, room 1561, but this was not going to happen, so we left after about 15 minutes. Our last stop on campus was East Hall, aka the East Engineering Building, where Mom and Dad met in their freshman math class. Lord knows where the class was held in the building, but Mom had kept a scrapbook of this exact time in their lives, and the scrapbooks still exist. Here's what she wrote. Our paths were first brought together because of two events which took place this month. We both entered the University of Michigan and both enrolled for Math 7, a 9 o'clock section in the East Engine building with Mr. Barrar. October, November, December 1950, the same math class, but it was only toward the latter part of the semester that we began to know each other slightly when we walked together from the East Engine to Chem building. We left the campus around 3 that afternoon, a bit overwhelmed with all the bustling. Here's a 2017 photo. It's so cool that Mom and Dad both found their way there to somehow come together amidst thousands of other students, 21,000 in 1950. And somewhere in this area was the hospital I was born in, but it was significantly rebuilt back in the 80s, and the old maternity ward is long gone. Well, goodbye, Ann Arbor. So nice to re-meet you on a beautiful, sunny day. That evening, we met with Mark and Barb Binkley in Brighton. Mark met us first and gave us a wonderful tour of their jewelry store. It's a sparkling and welcoming place. He shared history too about how his parents moved to the area and entered the jewelry business. We ended the evening over a delicious dinner at a popular Brighton restaurant. Thanks, Mark and Barb, for a special evening and a satisfying close to day 2 in Michigan. Our third and final morning in Michigan took us to Cedar Island Lake, where the Erickson clan and the Eddingers hung out together quite a bit at the Edinger home. That's Olinda Erickson Flagstad in the front and center. She was the family matriarch. She raised 4 boys and 1 girl, all in the photo. Zooming in on the party place, here's Jean, Mom's sister, in the foreground, and Beverly, Mom and Jean's cousin, in the middle, and Mom all sunbathing in the Eddingers' backyard, right by the lake. I love this shot. And here's Jean and Beverly again, likely that same day out by the lake. And here's Mom in a beautiful and well-preserved color photo. And here's Dad, skiing on the lake. You can't make him out in the postcard in the lower left, but that's him all right, as per Genevieve, who sent the postcard to Mom. So to pull this all together, Mom and I wanted to find the Edinger home, but the challenge for us now was to somehow find the home without an address. But we did have this photo, the front of the house, and this photo of the back. So we hoped we could find the home, just maybe if we looked around the community hard enough. We started our search on the north side. It was a lovely setting to explore, mostly very nice homes. Fairly quickly, we came upon a man standing in his driveway, smoking a pipe and taking it easy, so I pulled over and, with the 2 house photos in hand, I asked him if he knew of a home or any homes on the lakeside that resembled the pics. And amazingly enough, he said, yes, I do. Well, it's been remodeled 7 or 8 times, but it looks similar. It's right across the lake over on Pontchartrain. Woohoo! This was an excellent and lucky lead. Without further ado, that's where Mom and I headed. The house was only 5 minutes away, and this is what we found at 531 Pontchartrain Boulevard, right on Cedar Island Lake. Very similar footprint to the 1950 home. And very similar chimneys. I was convinced, well, mostly convinced. I was also curious about what the inside looks like at the modern model. So I looked it up on Redfin, 531 Pontchartrain, and good gracious, this is what appeared. A photo that looks exactly like the 1950s Edinger home. What is this old home doing on the new home property page at a real estate site? I clicked on Street View to learn more, and this was equally surprising. The 2022 view. There's no question anymore. The Edinger home was significantly transformed over time. The good news is we found the old Edinger party house. Mission accomplished. It's now early afternoon on day 3. Our flight leaves from Detroit at 6 p.m., but we have ample time to get there, and we have one big last goal to fulfill. Find Raymond and Genevieve's Commerce Hardware store and their adjacent home, and the 3 other Erickson and Edinger stores on the same land, all sited on the corner of Commerce and South Commerce roads. This location was certain, indicated by Mom's cousins Jack and Les Edinger and Les's wife Shirley back in 2003 when they and Mom were in regular contact. Wonderfully enough, Shirley called us on our first day in Michigan. She's 84 and doing very well in her Florida home. It was a real treat to connect with her and gain a few more details about the Edinger and Erickson families. So we drove to the famous, or maybe infamous corner. Infamous because Jack had shared some fun stories in the 2003 emails about Raymond's hijinks. There's no question this is absolutely where the stores were. This was confirmed, too, by a local historian, a lawyer I spoke with that morning. Once again, a surreal feeling overtook us. Here had been Commerce Hardware and the home Raymond built. Here had been the Erickson grocery store and the pharmacy, the gas station, and the bait barn where Mom worked in the summer of 1950, right after she graduated from high school and was preparing to move into her dorm at the University of Michigan. But all building structures once there were now in the ethers. We stayed just long enough to contemplate the stretch of bare ground and to feel the blatant passage of time. Well, this does end our trip to Michigan. Our time was hugely satisfying and unexpectedly powerful. We got around. And maybe we each wondered a bit, how do you know what or where your true home is? Can you have more than one true home? And who says you can't go home again? For sure, we were ready to be back in Maryland, and we kept our eyes on the time. Departure was closing in, and conversation was a bit quiet as we drove to Detroit and then flew back to the present time in Maryland. I hope you enjoyed this little travelogue. Thank you for watching.